We are Marc, Amy, Juliette and Clement from the medieval Chateau de Rosieres. This Christmas we've made you a very special advent calendar. Every day from the 1st to the 25th of December we will open the door to a different room in the chateau and introduce you to its past, present and future. Merry Christmas.
Today we're bringing you one of the most used rooms in the chateau. This is where we put most of our guests, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a very, well, quite a small bedroom. I guess it's a standard size for another building, but it's really nice and cozy. It's very comfortable. Yeah. It's small enough that it keeps warm in winter. And it is just ready to use.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. It's one of the nicest done up rooms in the chateau, and it's at the front of the chateau, so it's got those incredible views of the mountains in the front and the Alps in the distance. And especially when we have anyone stay here long term, this tends to be their room, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We say this is almost a ready to use room, and that's because we decided not to do any big changes to this room because we were looking for our future retreat centre to put as many ensuite bathrooms as possible in the chateau. And we had an architect do some plans. And one of the things he came up with was being able to squeeze a little bathroom in here in this alcove, which would then mean that the bed would be against that wall. We'd take out the connecting door to the next room, and it would just become a very cosy little room. And that was all very well, but after a while we decided that for several of the rooms we would not have an ensuite bathroom. It would mean a reduction in sort of value, the price we could ask for renting the room, because it would be a shared bathroom, albeit a beautiful big bathroom elsewhere. But we felt a duty to retain the character of some of these rooms, and if you can't make a change that doesn't significantly damage the room, it's just not right, was it?
No. And especially because this one has its beautiful original 18th century parquet flooring.
Yeah,
that's quite similar to the one we have in the big living room. And putting a bathroom in here would mean we would have to remove some of that flooring, and we really didn't feel that it was right to do anything like that.
No. This is quite a good showcase room for the whole idea of an alcove. And how long ago do these alcoves start to be used?
I don't know exactly. I think they've probably been used since the Middle Ages. At the time, in the Middle Ages, in some regions of France, they had what we call box beds, which are basically cupboards you sleep in. And so they were not used everywhere in France, but mostly in Auvergne, in mountain regions, in the Alps, and in Brittany. And it was basically a little box.
Room within a room, almost.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah. It was really even like sleeping in a cupboard, because they in the Middle Ages they had superstition that lying down was the position of death, and so they wouldn't lie down during their sleep for fear that they might die. And so they would rather sleep half sat or half against something, with their legs bent basically in a fetal position. And so they didn't need a big space to stretch. And also the effect is that it was more cozy, it was warmer, and so they would just huddle in a little box. And when it was really cold, they would just shut the doors and feel very warm and cozy. And it's only after, during the Renaissance, when they didn't, well, when these superstitions disappeared with the rational reasoning and things, that they still saw the interest of being a bit enclosed for warmth, but they were able to sleep in beds and actually stretch their legs and lie down during their sleep.
I mean, it's the same idea really as a four-poster bed, isn't it? Where that was the privacy and warmth thing where you could draw curtains around it.
Yeah, it was,
and you get that same sort of feeling in these. This is much more recent, but it's still this idea. What you end up with is a corridor. So instead of just walking into the room through the door, you walk into a mini corridor, and the corridor forms an alcove that the bed fits into. And actually we debate a little bit and dispute a little bit, you'll be surprised to hear, how to arrange the bed in this one. Because I quite like turning the bed to the side so that it's completely within the alcove and feels like you could just draw the curtains and be all cosy in there.
That's because she's not making the beds.
Yeah, I am making the beds! But Mark thinks it's much better, and clearly it is if there's two people, to be able to get in from the other side, and also it is easier to make the bed. Yeah, there are different ways of doing it. But we love this.
There are different ways, but there's one right one.
Oh my gosh. There is a few other interesting things in here, are there?
Well, we can talk about the wallpaper actually.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite a recent one because I think it was put by the previous owners. But the pattern is 18th century, and it is actually exactly the type of wallpaper you would have had in that sort of alcove. And I think they did a really good job there. Because it really matches the general atmosphere of the bedroom, and yeah, I really love it. I wouldn't want to touch that.
No, I think there's actually very little we would change in here at the moment. I mean, the plan in order to make this room and the next room into two sort of separate proper bedrooms is to close off that door, but even that is not urgent and could be done sometime in the future. It's quite nice to have one ready room that we can just bring people into when they come to visit, isn't it?
Mm. When we had the visit from Bruno Lavalette, he remembered. So it's for those who didn't see that vlog. We had the visit from somebody who lived here between 1943 and 47. So during the war. And he had really good memories of the place, and he remembered this room being occupied by the childminder who came with them from
the nanny, really.
The nanny, and his two sisters were in the bedroom next door. So there was she would be able to go and check on them through this door without having to go in the corridor.
It's really nice actually knowing a bit about somebody who lived here for quite a long time, and it's certainly, I think if I was working with a family, it would be a nice room to be in because you're right at the far corner and a bit away from everything. It's lovely, isn't it?
There is also very nice wood paneling in this bedroom with two cupboards on either side of the window. And that was always that idea of symmetry and harmony in the room. So the cupboards are more decorative than anything because they are very shallow, because most of the space is because the wall is really thick. But it just adds a pleasant little touch to the atmosphere of the room. This cupboard is actually temporarily taped around because we have a very inconvenient thing in this room, which is that every autumn it fills up with flies that come in through the cracks of the walls to hibernate. And that's actually something that's quite common in France. It's a special species of flies, and every autumn they gather in masses and just come in the rooms and die on the floor. And
so not a very successful hibernation then.
No, well, most of them die and some of them survive. But it is at a point that sometimes you can fill up a vacuum cleaner bag in just one room in a couple of weeks. It's really, really impressive when it happens. And we realized that they were actually coming through cracks in the wall through the cupboard. So before we can regrout the stones on the outside of the house, we had this temporary fix to just seal the cupboard instead.
Even though it's quite a small room, we still have quite an eclectic mix of furniture in here that come from our lives before we met each other, and also since we became completely obsessed with going to brocantes and auctions. And this wardrobe is an early 18th century wardrobe from Auvergne, which is where Marc's from, a kind of country wardrobe. And he had that before we met and was in his flat where he lived in Montpellier. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful, and it really fits the dimensions of this room and helps it feel really cosy. By contrast, my contribution is a 1960s Urkel rocking chair, which I absolutely love and which followed me around wherever I lived. And I think I quite like the sort of William Morrissey type fabric on it, although that's ripped recently. This little desk is one of my favourite pieces in the chateau. It's actually the same time period, early 18th century, as the wardrobe, but it's British. And weirdly, we got it from an auction on the border of France and Switzerland, which was quite an epic adventure, that one. We love going to house clearance auctions where they auction off everything that's been in a building, because you often find that if you like one thing at somebody's house, you like a lot of them. And this one, we went for another piece of furniture, and then when we got there, discovered we loved so much in this place. It was kind of a small chateau, and a lot of it was English in origin, and we don't know anything about the person who lived there before, but they'd obviously travelled the world because there were things from Germany, Switzerland, France, England, and we ended up buying so much stuff that we could barely fit it in the truck. And just as we were loading at the end of the day, it started to pour with rain, and it was quite an adventure packing everything in, because the thing is, at these house clearance auctions, they sell you the contents of a room. They don't go around a room and say, this one, this one, and this one. They say, who wants this room? And you go, me! Maybe some really high value stuff they do separately, but the rest, wow. And so...
Well, actually, Amy goes me, and I go slow down, slow down.
And this one, yeah, this was we got a few rooms worth, but you also then do some wheeler dealing with the other people around who've attended the auction, and we ended up getting some of the furniture from other rooms from antiques dealers who bought the whole room and didn't want it all, so you're sort of paying for yours and then buying it off somebody else and selling somebody else something. And so that still remains one of my favourite auctions, and I just love the details on it and the lion's heads. It's a really beautiful little desk, this one.
The last thing we want to show you in this room is just the two little frames, because that's really a classic of French brocante. You're able to find some of those etchings in nearly every brocante you would go to. It's there are 19th century fashion newspapers etchings, and I find them really pretty and very decorative because they had a bit of color, so it's not as dull as black and white etchings, and I find it quite efficient to decorate a room.
There's so much to show you in this room that Marc can't stop saying, shall we show them this, shall we show them this? And one last thing he wants to tell you about. So
the last thing is actually the fireplace. It's quite a basic fireplace like you would have had in bedrooms to provide a bit of heat. What's interesting about that one is that it was converted to charcoal in the 19th century. Because before that, they would have been fired with wood, which was the main carburant, source of fuel before then. But in the 19th century, charcoal became more widely available, and there were big deliveries, and it was a much more efficient source of heat, and also it didn't have the same fire hazard as wood, so it was often used in the upstairs rooms of the chateau, and so several of the fireplaces have been converted to charcoal.
And that really was the last thing in here to show you today.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for watching.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
No, nothing, I'm done. That was the last thing.
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you get to see tomorrow's episode.
Bye bye.